They notice your work. They use your ideas. But when it's time for recognition, it's like you were never even in the room. Here's what nobody tells you. Respect isn't given to the loudest. It's magnetized by the rarest. And you're rare. But rarity has a cost. You're not invisible because you're weak. You're invisible because your presence makes others feel exposed, and that unsettles them. Rarity disrupts comfort, and comfort hates disruption. Even Machiavelli, one of history's most influential thinkers on power, understood this. He spent his life decoding how people gain influence, how they hold it, and how easily it's lost. It wasn't advice for the crowd. It was a message for those ready to lead from the shadows. And centuries ago, he wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are." So why do the most valuable people get overlooked? Why does silence get mistaken for weakness? Why do those who build in shadows stay trapped in them? Let's break the code and rewire the game. This isn't about being louder. It's about becoming unignorable. And the first move, we stop giving away power for free. You give, you deliver, you exceed, but still, you remain in the background. You don't just finish tasks, you carry invisible weight. You solve problems before they appear. You keep systems from collapsing. And you power outcomes no one dares to challenge. And yet, when it's time for recognition, you vanish. Not because you failed, but because they never learned how to see someone who does not demand to be seen. Ever watched someone repeat your idea louder and get the credit? Ever stayed silent, thinking results would speak for themselves, only to realize no one was listening? They see noise, they reward it. They feel charisma, they promote it. But value, real value, that requires depth. And depth frightens those who have only mastered the surface. Here is the truth most will not say aloud. Competence without strategy is a recipe for irrelevance. You may be the sharpest, most consistent person in the room, but when you are always available, endlessly accessible, and easy to rely on without positioning, your brilliance becomes like background music. Always play, never noticed. And that is not your fault, but it is now your responsibility. You have been following an outdated code. Stay humble, work hard, don't speak too much. But here's the twist. That code only works when the world already knows your worth. And most of them don't. You have given too much, too often, too freely. And when value is always accessible, it stops being recognized as value at all. You are not ignored because you are weak. You are ignored because you have been too easy to reach, too easy to predict, too easy to manage. So this is where the shift begins. Not in how loudly you speak, but in how strategically you reveal. Not in how often you show up, but in how aware and defined your presence becomes. Most surface-level minds have already left by now, which tells you everything. If you are still here, it means something deeper. You value your presence. You are not just chasing applause. You are building gravity. You do not want respect handed to you. You want it earned, anchored, and unshakable. And now, the real secrets begin. This was one of Machiavelli's most dangerous insights. Not the ones he wrote for kings to follow, but the one he reserved for those who wanted to rule from the shadows. If you want your presence to command power, make it scarce. Because you are not here to blend in. You are here to be felt, whether you speak or not. Power does not always come from presence. Often it comes from absence, but not just any absence. An absence that feels earned, controlled, chosen. Have you ever noticed how some people get more attention by saying less? That is not confidence. That is design. Strategic scarcity means making your energy rare, your words measured, and your access earned. Not because you are arrogant, but because you are no longer on tap. The more constantly you are available, the more casually you are dismissed. Not because people are cruel, but because the mind devalues what it sees too often. Unlimited access creates unearned familiarity, and familiarity, it kills mystique. Think of fertile land. When a field is oversown, too many seeds, too frequently, without pause, the soil gets tired, the yield collapses, and nothing truly grows. But when the land is given time to rest, when you pause, withhold, and return deliberately, the harvest is richer, the roots go deeper, and the value multiplies. You are not here to be a convenience. You are here to be a catalyst. And catalysts do not run 24/7. They strike when it matters. That is you. When you stop giving everything away, stop attending every meeting, stop replying instantly, stop offering ideas just to fill silence. Hold back, observe. Let people wonder what you are thinking. Let your pauses speak louder than their noise. Silence is not awkward, it is tension, and tension pulls attention. A diamond does not scream to be noticed. It simply exists, rare, precise, unapologetically restrained. That is strategic scarcity, the art of being missed before you are gone, and valued before you arrive. But beware, scarcity without presence becomes irrelevance. Because in the next law, we do not just protect our energy, we weaponize our return. Are you ready for that? Did you ever wonder how some people carry such gravity without saying a word? How a room shifts when they enter, even before they speak? It is not charisma. It is something deeper, something engineered. And here is the question no one asks. What if their silence is not passive, but calculated? Machiavelli uncovered this centuries ago while observing the courts of Florence, palaces where appearance was everything, but presence was everything else. He was not just studying politics, he was decoding something more elusive, how real power walks without sound. He noticed the pattern. Those who held true power did not chase attention. They did not rush to be heard. They simply distorted the room around them, like gravity distorts light. That is the second law of silent power, calculated presence. You do not need to be loud to be respected. Think about it. When was the last time someone's silence made you lean in? When was the last time stillness felt louder than noise? Calculated presence is the art of entering a space in such a way that others adjust to you. You do not sync to their rhythm. They sync to yours. You do not chase tempo. You create it. When you walk in, the emotional temperature changes, not because you demand it, but because your presence interrupts theirs. You disrupt the room without a word. You do not need noise to prove value. You just need presence that refuses to shrink. A lion does not roar to prove it is a lion. Its silence says everything. Your grounded energy calibrates the nervous systems of others. Your calm becomes contagious, and that is the secret the noisy ones will never understand. Real power does not react. It radiates. Your presence should feel like a black hole. No sound, no motion. Yet everything bends toward you. Not because you demand it, but because your absence threatens to speak louder than their noise. That is how power works when it is silent. It does not flash, it pulls. And just when they think they have figured you out, you do something most never dare. You pull back. You disappear just enough to become unforgettable. Because the final law of quiet power is not about showing more. It is about revealing less. Have you ever wondered why the most respected people always seem slightly out of reach? They do not flood you with stories. They do not explain themselves. And yet, you cannot stop thinking about them. This is the third law of silent power, psychological distance. It is not coldness. It is not arrogance. It is control. Because when people think they fully know you, they stop being curious. And when they stop being curious, your presence begins to fade. Power does not vanish when you say less, it sharpens. Machiavelli did not just study kings, he studied their silences. In the palaces of Florence, he watched rulers weaponize restraint, not to deceive, but to keep control. They knew, when people cannot predict you, they cannot reduce you. And what they cannot reduce, they respect. You do not become powerful by being understood. You become powerful by being impossible to define. But here is where most people sabotage themselves. They overshare to feel close. They explain to feel accepted. They pour everything out, hoping to seem trustworthy. But the more you reveal, the less they reach. Think about the last person who truly captivated you. Was it their openness or their restraint? Here is the truth no one says out loud. The more accessible you are, the more forgettable you become. So what is the antidote? It is the 70% rule. Reveal 70% of your thoughts, your intentions, your emotions, Hold back the rest. Unspoken, unfinished, unreachable. That is the tension that holds their attention, because you do not need to be the sun. You need to be the black hole, invisible but inescapable, quiet but undeniable, the kind of presence that bends everything around it. Become a mirror. Reflect just enough for others to see themselves, never enough for them to see through you. Distance does not push people away. It draws them in when it is deliberate, not as a wall, but as a boundary. And boundaries, unlike walls, do not repel. They define. They should not know your next move. They should feel its shadow before it even happens. So what happens when you have mastered all three laws, when you become scarce, calculated, and unreadable? That is when you stop chasing power and start radiating it. But most people stop here. They treat silence as absence. You will not. You are going to use it as command. Thank you for watching this far. If this video resonates with you, subscribe now, because what is coming next is not decoration. It is design. Machiavellian clarity, layered, sharp, and built for those who do not just want respect, but control. And now we step into the deeper current, where silence is not just restraint, it is pressure. Like a volcano before eruption, true power does not flinch or flare up. It waits, quiet, heavy, felt long before it is seen. And when it moves, nothing stands in its way. But here's what most people miss. Stillness does not mean passivity. It means pressure building beneath the surface. Have you ever stayed silent and watched the room get louder? Most people assume silence is a weakness. What if that silence is not hesitation, but strategy? They underestimate you. They think you froze, panicked, did not know what to say. But that assumption is exactly why silence works. Because silence activates tension, and tension pulls attention. You have seen it happen. Someone throws a challenge, a jab, a test, and instead of reacting, you pause. And all you did was hold the space. It unsettled them. Because silence is not what they expect. They expect reaction. They expect ego. It is the same reason a conductor does not raise his voice, yet the orchestra moves. Not because he speaks, but because his stillness guides the tempo. Stillness that makes others move. Most people fear being unreadable. They fill silence with noise, with nervous words, with unnecessary explanations. But power thrives on that fear. The less you reveal, the more control you hold. Not every emotion deserves an audience. When you pause, they project. They wonder what you are thinking. You are compressing pressure. And that pressure, when released, shifts the room. In a world addicted to noise, restraint becomes magnetic. Because silence is not the absence of sound. Stillness, real stillness, is not emptiness. It is potential, waiting. But do not mistake this as the final move. What do you do when they push? When your silence draws fire? And this is where Machiavelli's darker rule begins. When power stays quiet, it must also stay unshakable. Because what comes next is not silence. It is command. Every lion is tested, not by equals, but by hyenas. Loud, reactive, desperate to provoke. Have you ever been challenged publicly, not for what you said, but because you did not say anything? Silence makes people uncomfortable, and in that discomfort, they strike, just to see if you will flinch. This is the Machiavellian law of threat reversal. When you hold power quietly, the noise will try to expose you, and that is where your real test begins. Because power is not how you strike back. It is how still you remain when the world expects a reaction. Think of a volcano. It does not respond to every tremor. It does not warn before it shifts the earth. It watches, waits, and when it moves, there is no doubt who holds the power. So when you are tested, pause. Let them echo. Let them spin. It is not weakness. It is dominance in disguise. You are not dodging, you are dismantling, gently, surgically, and without raising your voice. Because when they lose their temper, you gain control. That is how real power handles the storm. It does not compete with chaos. It lets the chaos discredit itself. And in the silence that follows, you own the room without even claiming it. You have seen leaders who bark orders, and you have seen those who do not need to. The room follows them, not because they shout, but because they shape direction without appearing to. This is invisible leadership, and Machiavelli saw it play out in the most dangerous corridors of power. Not in kings issuing commands, but in the advisors whose whispers rewrote kingdoms. They did not crave recognition. They controlled perception. Here is the secret. True power is not always out front. It is wherever your presence reshapes decisions without your name attached. Think of gravity. You do not see it, but you feel its pull in everything. That is the level you are reaching for. You do not raise your voice. You raise the standard. Speak less, ask better. What is your view? What are we overlooking? How would you approach it? When you lead with questions, you guide the flow. Not as a force, but as a current beneath the surface. Let others feel ownership of the outcome, even if you planted the seed. That is how power scales quietly. It is not about the spotlight. It is about tilting the room while standing in the dark. Machiavelli called it controlling the frame. When others think they are making choices, but every path they see was laid by you. That is leadership that lasts. But there is one final turn most never expect. A principle Machiavelli hinted at, but never fully revealed. Because the final move is not about being seen. It is about what happens when you disappear and still control the room. You have seen the surface. Now you understand the structure beneath it. Not noise, not charm, but restraint. And this is where things stop sounding clever and start becoming real. Because power is not just theory. It is architecture. It needs to be built. So let us build it. Start with subtraction. Who gets your time without effort? Who asks for your insight like it is always available? Start saying no, or better, start saying nothing. Strategic scarcity begins here, in the courage to become less accessible. Because if your energy is always on tap, it stops being water. It becomes noise. Next time they ask for your input, do not rush to speak. Pause. Let the silence reframe your value. Ask yourself, does this moment require my presence, or will my absence say more? Then, when you do show up, do not sink to the room. Shift it. You are not there to match their rhythm. You are there to interrupt it. Before you enter, still yourself. Walk in like a question they do not know how to answer. Let them feel your weight before you speak. That is calculated presence, not performance, but posture. And finally, do not reveal everything. Obscure just enough. The 70% rule becomes your new compass. When they ask for your thoughts, share 70%. When they push for your plans, give 70%. Hold the rest. Not to hide, but to deepen. Because mystery is not deception, it is depth. A shallow pond is loud, a deep one is still. And you are becoming still. Scarcity without presence is invisibility. Presence without mystery is intimidation. But when you merge all three, scarcity, presence, and distance, you stop playing the game. You start bending it. You become unplaceable, unpredictable, unforgettable. But there is one final move, a principle so sharp it was buried beneath centuries of noise. The one Machiavelli reserved not for kings, but for those who move kings. The art of not just speaking less, but disappearing entirely. Strategic withdrawal. And if you have made it this far, what is coming next is not noise. It is the final weapon. It is how you disappear, deliberately, and return with the weight of a storm. They will not see it coming, because the final move is not louder. It is cleaner, sharper, disguised as absence. This is the law most ignore, and that is exactly why it works. Strategic withdrawal. To the untrained eye, it looks like retreat, but in truth, it is a reset, a calculated pause to reclaim perception and reframe the story without saying a word. You have already learned how to be rare. You have learned how to be felt without speaking. But now you will learn the rarest move of all, how to vanish without losing control. Not ghosting, not quitting, just subtracting your energy until your absence becomes heavier than their noise. Because silence is not weakness, it is leverage. Machiavelli saw it too. The sharpest blade is the one not always drawn. So you step back, let their assumptions speak, let their questions echo, because the moment you disappear, you become the one they cannot stop thinking about. When you return, you are no longer familiar. You are recalibrated. Your presence becomes choice, not habit. That is strategic withdrawal. The quietest way to command a room is to leave just long enough to be missed. And if this resonates, you have already felt it. The tension of knowing exactly what to say and choosing silence instead. The clarity of being rare while others shout to be seen. The calm of knowing you do not need to fight for the room. The room adjusts to you. You have seen the laws. You have felt the shift. Scarcity, presence, distance, command, withdrawal. This is not just a method, it is a mindset. And if you have stayed through it, you are not just watching, you are stepping into it. Let them perform. Let them chase. You have chosen the long game. You have chosen clarity over noise, strategy over spectacle. And this, it is not the end. It is the threshold. Because what comes next is not just power. It is psychological clarity, self-respect fortified by strategy, and tools to move in a world built to distract you. If you are building a mind that cannot be manipulated, this is where you sharpen it. Subscribe, not for noise, but for strategies that stay standing long after the crowd moves on.